Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. Yesterday, Jonathan Karl of ABC News asked the President of the United States a question. What resulted was not so much an answer to the question as a statement by the President of the United States that Jonathan Karl and ABC News were anti-Trump and that all they did was spew hate. It was fascinating because the President of the United States is essentially saying, we're going to get you. Oh, you don't believe me? It's very simple and very clear. Let me point out that this is not the only action of Donald Trump's which I find of deep concern. Donald Trump filed a lawsuit against the New York Times. You might wonder how much the lawsuit is for. It is for $15 billion, with a B, $15 billion. This is part of his continued intimidation of the media. And let's be clear. ABC News just forked over a rather substantial sum because ABC chose to settle rather than go all the way in a court battle. I wish they'd gone all the way in the court battle. I think they would have won. I think that Donald Trump's intimidation, whether it is of ABC, NBC, CBS, 60 Minutes, yes, indeed, all of the networks who offer any criticism at all, is astounding. Now, I know that lawsuit against the New York Times will be dismissed without merit. By the way, if the Times had to fork up that kind of money, it'd go out of business because it doesn't have those assets. Do you understand that there is a war going on against the media and it's being conducted by Donald Trump? There is something of profound concern when the President of the United States ignores the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and I believe he does. And you can see it every day in the way he acts and the way he responds. And then there's the question of Kash Patel, the director of the FBI. I listened attentively to the hearing yesterday in which Kash Patel gave testimony, and he was confronted by Cory Booker, United States Senator and potential candidate for the Democratic nomination for president. Cory Booker laid it out because it's true. There has been a purge in the FBI. Kash Patel has fired anybody who had any identification with investigations of Donald Trump. There is no doubt that Kash Patel is politicizing, or let me be clear, has politicized the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Just take a look at what has happened to personnel in the FBI. I say this because this is part of a continued effort by the Trump administration, and yes, by Donald Trump, to intimidate the media, to purge the government of so-called enemies. The most professional people in the FBI have been laid off. Field agents who've done brilliant work for years, gone. And it will take, in the words of some former FBI officials, generation, at least a generation, to repair the damage done by Kash Patel and Donald Trump. This concerns me, along with the idea of blacklisting. I referred yesterday to the fact that the University of California at Berkeley has submitted a list to the Justice Department of 160 individuals who might be accused of anti-Semitism. And I pointed out yesterday in this podcast that this kind of blacklisting, this kind of, it's McCarthyism. It is what Joe McCarthy did for years, and that Edward R. Murrow exposed. I wish we had a network today that could expose what is happening when it comes to blacklisting. because that's what it is. It's blacklisting. I say this to you with some regret, and there are some of you who email me or text me on a regular message basis who say, you're just anti-Trump. And the answer is I'm not anti-Trump. I'm anti what Trump is doing to American democracy. Now, you know that the political assassination which took place last week has raised questions about media bias, raised questions about whether or not there are those who, well, may have been broadly responsible in a liberal effort to destroy him. All I know is that one deranged individual fired a shot. But I also know that now Donald Trump and his allies are painting a broad brush against the left, what they call the left in the United States. And by the way, that means Democrats. Democrats should be worried. This is a no-holds-barred war against those who oppose Donald Trump. I've never seen anything like this in my years of studying and living American political history. Even Nixon's enemies list did not go as far as what Donald Trump is doing. And when the enemies list was exposed during the Nixon years, there was universal condemnation. What I hear now, and I say this with the deepest regret, what I hear now is defense of Donald Trump, defense of his enemies list, defense of his going after ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which may in fact go bankrupt because of Donald Trump and his moves. What I'm addressing now is something more important than perhaps any other thing I could discuss. I was in the media for 30 years. I loved every minute of it. No one ever told me what I could or could not say. Our license was never threatened because we might have had a critic of one president or another. The simple fact is, we really have a problem. It is a genuine issue. And whether one looks at Jonathan Karl or Kash Patel or what is being done now by the Trump administration, it should raise concerns from everyone. Can you imagine if a liberal Democrat were president and these kinds of attacks were leveled? Why, can you imagine? I would be just as concerned. This morning, I wanted to address this question with you, even as the president is greeted in England with pomp and ceremony. And we'll be talking about that, I'm sure, in the days ahead. But what I'm worried about is what is happening here in the United States of America. How we are conducting ourselves, and how the bully pulpit of the presidency of the United States is being used to attack the media. There is nothing more sacred in my business than freedom of the press. There is nothing more sacred than freedom of expression. And when there is an attempt to muzzle, to prosecute, to sue those in the media with whom one disagrees, well, you and I know the result. The result, my friends, is not good. Not good at all. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. And of course, continue to email me, continue to post your views. Let me know what you think on LinkedIn. Let me know. I want to know. And I think it is so important that we remember that freedom of the press, free speech, is so vital to America. Also, a special thank you to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast, who makes sure we are up and running every single day. Gogo, you have my eternal gratitude. I am John Rothman. You are listening to Around the Political World with John Rothman, and I will be back tomorrow, right here with you.